It is currently the world's largest phased array transmitter. This is basically Tesla technology. I'm sure a lot of the audience is familiar with systems like HARP, which is effectively built on the surface of the Earth, and it has a 2D situation. It has length and width as far as a phased array goes. The South Pole Station differs in so far as it also goes down deep into the ice, giving it a third dimension, length, width, and height. So it has exponential more, I guess you would say, capabilities, targeting it's like HARP on steroids, basically. So, yes, it generated the earthquakes that occurred in Christchurch, New Zealand in February of 2011. Basically, the trick of it all, one of the things that I learned when I went to this event in Alamosa, Colorado, I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Simeon Hine, and he was doing a presentation on ball lightning. And one of the things that he discussed was how there are reports when earthquakes occur that ball lightning, I guess you would say, is ejected, manufactured by the earthquake. So I engaged him in a dialogue, and I said, well, Doc, wouldn't there be some sort of symmetry there, that if an earthquake can discharge ball lightning, wouldn't we be able to deliver ball lightning to generate an earthquake? And he agreed that it's just simply the matter of being able to deliver said energy, which for all practical purposes, think of it having an explosive capacity to it. So if you can wirelessly transmit energy from a power supply somewhere on Earth, deliver it to another location, the end result is quite simply an earthquake. Wireless transmission of energy is something that Nikola Tesla has brought up, 100 some odd years ago now. So this is the state of the union, is that Nikola Tesla discovered this stuff. The powers that be absconded his information. They cordoned it off away from the mass population and have been monopolizing the use of these types of technologies for many decades now. We, the people, are suffering under this monopoly of technology by our oppressors. It's literally just that simple. And that would be the motive for them to have agents, for lack of a better term, flooding the disclosure community with BS to muddy the waters and confuse us, we the people, so that we can continue to be wholly oppressed and well managed. First and foremost, one of the things that the former crew members had emphasized to me to try to get people to understand as I'm trying to get this information out there is that you have to understand it's just very easy now to deliver that energy anywhere on the planet. It's not challenging.
Like they can pick a spot. They can They can pick a spot in Iran, and they can just dial it in on the computer and launch an earthquake.
Deliver the energy that instigates it. The term that people should become familiar with is earthquake induction or earthquake inducing. So similar to like when you go on the internet and you Google chemtrails, right? You're going to get a whole bunch of baloney that says chemtrails are garbage, blah, blah. But if you Google the term stratospheric aerosol injection, you'll start to find all of the science of what's really going on when they crisscross our skies. Inducing earthquakes or earthquake induction, you will become privy to a sea of information and science that supports the existence of this technology. It's just that available. People just need to start paying attention to what's going on in the world around them and this disparity in technology. As far as who's running the facility, I'm not 100% sure. This was part of that conversation that I had in Washington, D.C., is because it seems like these unacknowledged special access programs, USAP, which anybody who's paying close attention, USAP is the actual title of the Antarctic program. It's the United States Antarctic Program, USAP. It is a USAP program by definition. So wow. They are being very deceptive as to what the secondary and tertiary capacities are for this massive phased array system, and they're just pumping it out to the general population as if it's operating under the auspices of science. Of course, things like that have to be secreted away. They're not going to be running around saying we have the world's largest directed energy weapons system at the South Pole Station in Antarctica, because first and foremost, it would breach the Antarctic treaties. And people would say, oh, well, they would never do that. Well, study Greenland and look what happened down there when the United States of America was sneaking nuclear missile bases into Greenland without telling the local authorities. This is an activity that our nation and many other nations are more than happy to break the rules every single chance they get. It is that simple. These systems themselves, we're just observing Mother Nature and the flow of her energies. We call it a storm. We call it a hurricane. It's just a matter of practice through the application and delivery from systems like this that have copious amounts of power available to deliver. It's just a matter of playing around and learning the targeting and reaction. It's application of intention and checking the reaction. And this is something that they seem to have gotten dialed in, whether it be through one singular system at the South Pole, or like we're seeing with the NextRad systems, or potentially through integrating with other HARP platforms around the world. We just need to start to appreciate that this is exactly how it works and how simple it can be. Energy can be delivered wirelessly with great accuracy and impact, and we're witnessing it with our own eyes. And we need to start asking the right questions of the right people. And we need to stop being led by the nose by the misinformationists and disinformationists that, frankly, don't really have any skin in the game other than profiteering. It's a neutrino detector. Okay, well, what did it cost? And what's the price per neutrino detected? And what do we do with that information? What's the value in science that's the return on the investment for the average mortgage payer that's investing into this? What do we care where neutrinos are coming from? It doesn't seem to have much logic and reasoning to what we're being told its function is. But if we realize that there are rogue factions in control of the world's largest phased array transmitter that can deliver copious amounts of energy anywhere on the planet to manipulate storms, to increase them, to steer them, to create earthquakes. It was many decades ago that the Air Force put together a plan to control the weather by 2025. This is a report that's available on the internet now. This is a report that was handed to me in great secrecy many years ago. I was told to never get caught with it, but it stated very clearly that weather warfare and weather manipulation was the battlefield of the future, that he who controls the weather controls the planet. I do not believe that the United States government is the only faction working in this capacity. I do not even believe that nation states are the only factions working in this capacity. In my experience, nation states are puppets to military industrial corporation contractors. Those folks run the world because there's no freedom of information that allows you to dig into their archives and let us know what they're doing. They simply manufacture whatever they want and then sell it to the highest bidder. Nothing prevents these companies from building their own fleets of UFOs. Nothing's stopping them from going off planet and mining asteroids if they want. Here's another thing that people don't consider. If we're not told that a technology exists, then it's not regulated.
I spent an entire year at the South Pole Station on the maintenance crew. And the Ice Cube neutrino detector was simply one facility of many that I paid attention to there. And in that process, I obviously learned the science and stuff like that. Like you said, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo that people don't really need to know about, but that's the pretense that it's presented to the world, that the National Science Foundation cut a check for this facility at the South Pole Station and is doing science, wonderfully complex science. But what I have come to find out is that this device, not only is it a passive observational scientific device that is massive and embedded in the ice at the South Pole, it also transmits. I provided documentation for it. Anybody can look it up now. It is referenceable on the internet. I call it the DOM document, and it's on the archives at my website. But what it states is that this device, which has 5,160 DOMs, which is a digital optical module, the idea is that it's observing the neutrino interaction when it hits the nucleus of an ice molecule down there. That's what it's supposed to be built to do. But I found in the paperwork that each of these DOMs also can transmit up to 2,047 volts per DOM. That makes this a giant, powerful, active phased array system, which I am now doing due diligence to let the world know what that means. And the possibilities list is huge. Because
so before we go out too far into that, let's deal with the basics here, is what I was wanting you to talk about.
You got it.
I know you were there working for Raytheon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go through that. You were assigned there for a year working with Raytheon. It was year X to Y. I mean, just the whole thing before we get into a lot of the technical.
You got it. So from November of 2010, I landed on the ice at McMurdo Station and was rapidly deployed further south to 90 degrees at the South Pole Station. I stayed there for the 365 days. That employment, that time period, I guess, was for the summer season. We had we peaked out at close to 280 personnel at the site in the summer season. The winter season, we went down to 49. And the neutrino detector was something that I was pretty much obligated to go out to every single day. The equipment was so much. This is another thing that I learned that's peculiar, is there's actually so much computer processing equipment. And remember, this is the South Pole Station in the wintertime. My job required me to go out there, and people laugh at me for this and get mad, but I say it. We had chicken wire on an air inlet duct, like a snorkel duct, that the snorkel side went up to and connected to the building, and there was louvers there that were temperature-activated louvers. So the processing of these computers made so much heat that in order to cool it down, they were opening the louvers to transfer exterior air in to keep these computers cold. People really, think about that. This is a building it's sometimes minus 80 degrees outside. To think that you need that type of cooling capacity, and that was what my job was to make sure this building wasn't overheating in the middle of winter at the South Pole. The central facility where all the processing happens is sitting atop the ice at South Pole Station, which is 10,300 feet actual elevation, and that is ice above Earth. So the ice cube drillers first had to go and drill. They would steam drill down and go basically 2 miles down, close to a 32 to 34 inch diameter hole, and they would drop a string cable down with all of these DOMs on it. Each one of those holes was drilled down, and it was drilled in a giant hexagon that covered kilometers of area in a length and width dimension, and then as far as the depth, going all the way down close to Earth at approximately 2 miles down to that. And everything was cabled and went back to the central building where all the processing computer server towers were and all that stuff. And that was the facility that was being accessed every day and made to be chilled. So fall 2010 was when I arrived. We transitioned. It was right around, I think, January or February that IceCube officially transitioned from construction to operations and maintenance. Same thing with the elevated station itself, actually, that year. Intended purpose for the IceCube neutrino detector was to detect neutrinos through the muon creation, which was when a neutrino coming from anywhere, in any direction, it could be from the other side of the planet, from off planet, through the planet, it doesn't matter. But when any of those neutrinos smashes into the nucleus of the water molecule, which is in the extremely pure ice. There's nothing else in there, so that's kind of why they're doing it, because they know it's a concentration of something specific, which is just pure water, great product. When it hits the nucleus, there's two things that occur. a blue flash of light, and the neutrino and the nucleus are destroyed, and a new product called a muon is created. The detector is searching for the blue flash of light. So whatever direction it comes from, it would make like a blast through the array, that when it would hit the nucleus, it would be like a reaction through all of the different DOMs, because they're optical modules and they're receiving at that point. On the receiving end, there's just a bloom that shows up in the array. And from that bloom and the amount of light that hits each DOM, they can triangulate the direction from which the neutrino came from. I was told that they would then take that information, transmit it to all the different telescopes in the world, and then that would allow them to then look, because they're so curious as to what neutrinos are and where they come from.
Mm-hmm. And so that was what they were telling you, is that this was a observation technology related to astrophysics or astronomy somehow.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And what did you discover it actually is used for?
Quite much more. The ability to transmit is a big deal, and I know a lot of people may not necessarily understand what that means. So I want to paint a picture for them. It's one thing to say that, and the government does this all the time. They sidestep stuff. Mm-hmm. It would be like if somebody walked up to you and they had something you had never ever seen before in your life, and they're just simply calling it a bullet carrier. It's a bullet carrier. It carries bullets. But if they never told you it's a pistol or a handgun, they're being rather deceptive in what that thing does. And that's the way I now look at the ice cube neutrino detector, is that this is a savagely different device from what I was presented. And I'm trying to express to the world what that means, because it is absolutely a very big deal.
So you're convinced it was also had not only data gathering, but also offensive weapon capability.
I'm absolutely suggesting that is still on the list of things to check into. I'm a firm advocate of Occam's razor, that every possibility is left on the table, and I have to assess each one. And the split second I can negate something as a possibility, I will apply Occam's razor, cut it off, and remove it. But so far, everything that's left on the table is still possible. And there's a lot to be said for the potential of directed energy weapons.
Yeah, we can get into that in a moment, but I'm trying to stick with, the things that are factually happened and observed, and then we can talk about implications and our assessment in a moment. You told me a very interesting thing that happened the instant they switched this system on. The New Zealand event.
I have a high suspicion that this is when it was going active and they were dialing things in, and that they caused the Christchurch accident that was during my season 2010.
You're referring to the earthquake.
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. I believe that they were dialing it in, and there was a high probability that was just a misfire.
Mm-hmm. And a side effect. See, one of the things that people, just to give a little background, a lot of people have heard me refer in the past of scalar and longitudinal electromagnetic energy, which, just give people, not to geek out too far here, but when you look at a normal light wavelength, there's a wave to it like this, and a laser is coherent light where all the green spectrum is lined up. When you're doing something with the longitudinal scalar waves are actually a point that goes out longitudinally without the wave, and is much faster than the speed of light, literally, and the normal speed of light is still light, it's still electromagnetic field, but it also can be weaponized. So the early one of the euphemisms that are used, you were talking about the euphemism of this being some kind of like a bullet carrier, when really it's a gun. People don't realize that when J. Edgar Hoover was written to by the field agent there in Roswell, the memo we have that's now become the most viewed document on the FBI website officially states that there was a new, quote, radar array at Roswell In fact, what that is often used at, people I have here, I'm in Washington right now, who have worked in these systems, radar is often a euphemism or a catch-all phrase for not only a passive detection of an aircraft or, bouncing waves off the metal skin of an aircraft, radar, but also an active warfare system, and they will piggyback them together. So this is a common motif. It's a pattern that I've seen over the last 30 years of working in this area. And I know that it's also true that the operational systems that were not only the neutrino light detectors on satellites in the, almost 50 years ago now, in the early mid 70s, those were, quote, slaved to active systems that were longitudinal scalar directional energy weapon type systems that would then lock on. Now, why is that important? When an interstellar vehicle is stepping down, let's call it, out of transdimensional space-time, resonating beyond the speed of light, matter, electrons as we think of it. That's that whole area of physics that's been kept secret. When they are going from that into this dimension full on, the very first thing that happens is a big burst of neutrino light. And that's why the National Reconnaissance Office that runs all the really super secret satellite systems up in space wanted this man's invention and system back in the early 70s. So we know that those systems have been used for detection connected to offensive weapon targeting purposes for that long. I think it's a stepping the game up quite a bit. If in fact there is a similar system ground-based at the South Pole. And one thing you mentioned, I want to emphasize, neutrinos go straight through the Earth, matter, anywhere unimpeded. So the fact that it's on the South Pole doesn't mean that it can only pick up neutrino bursts that are coming from the direction of the South Pole out into space. It can pick it up circumferentially everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people make that error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually have an understanding. My ex-father-in-law passed away, but before he passed away, he had informed me that when he was in the Army way back when, in World War II, he was in a very special detail that was working with the first microwave line of sight radar. Excuse me. And it was very special stuff. He was super top secret. They never left the country. And they were ordered to write letters as if they were in the European front.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize that these sort of electromagnetic fields and experimentation, these go back to the late 1800s.
Correct.
And the early 1900s. If you look at this historically, this is why, I at some point, maybe in the near future, I want to work on a documentary that's a special 2-hour deep dive going back over 100 years on the sort of hidden electromagnetic and related technologies. Because obviously they can be used to tap into the so-called 0 point or quantum vacuum and give us free energy and save the biosphere. But, I always say this as a medical doctor, emergency doctor, that you can take a knife to put butter on your bread or to slice someone's throat. And unfortunately, the latter is what's been going on in these covert programs, because they've all been hoovered up like a giant vacuum cleaner into covert unacknowledged special access projects and developed for military purposes. And this is an enormous problem, because most of those sort of systems, by the way, if you bring something like this up to someone, in the White House or even most directors of the CIA and or members of Congress and Senate Intelligence Committee, they know absolutely nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, I mean zero about this. That's a problem. I mean, it's a huge problem because there's no oversight on it. So tell us a little bit more of what your research into this has uncovered, and any other people that you've stayed in touch with who have still worked in that facility, and
I think
and what the status of it now, 10 years on.
I think it's perfect where you were just at, because I think the reason those people are ignorant about these types of projects is because of compartmentalization of information. And it's amazing because here I am, somebody who actually wintered at the South Pole Station. And from a crew, I mean, these are limited numbers of people on the planet that do this. And even of that crew, I'm one of the few that was able to see through the compartments. So yes, I've stayed in contact with people, because a lot of this has been getting in touch with folks and saying, hey, you know what? You remember that time that such and such happened and we had to respond, and this was what we were told, and this was what was going on. What if we look at it this way? I need to talk to you. So a lot of that has happened. I've absolutely been in touch with a lot of the hands from my crew. One of the main reasons that I'm coming forward is because I've maintained that contact, and I do believe these people have been negatively impacted by what I believe are now called directed energy weapons. That, that people have suffered. There are physical things that happen to people that are near this equipment when they're figuring out how it works. And then also, I believe that because we had a potential to go offensively, I believe there's a potential for us to have been attacked